Good afternoon and welcome to Born Loved. My name's Michael. It's my privilege to be welcoming you here this afternoon. What is Born Loved? Born Loved is a week of talks inviting every student in this city to explore the identity that Jesus offers and to consider what it might mean to be born loved by Jesus. Each lunchtime talk addresses a common objection that people have to the Christian faith, and this lunchtime is no exception. We're going to be joined by Michelle Tepper, who will be considering the question of restrictive, why only one way to God? She'll speak for about half an hour, at which point I'll say a few things, and then there'll be a short break. So if you have to leave to get somewhere by 2 p.m. for a lecture, then you'll be able to go at that point. But if not, then please do text in questions that you have. You can see the number there on the screens, off the back of what Michelle's been talking about. And then we're going to have a short time of Q&A, where she'll be addressing some of the questions on those screens. As I said, we're joined by Michelle today, and Michelle was actually a student here in Oxford not long ago, and she was at the best college in Oxford, which is, for those of you who are not aware, New College, to which I have no affiliation, and she was studying the best degree, which is PPE. Of course, I'm not doing PPE. And yeah, so after she finished her studies, she actually started working in St. Aldate's Church and worked there for 7 or 8 years, I think, and that's this church, so I'm sure she'll feel very comfortable talking to us today. Anyway, enough from me, over to Michelle. Please give her a warm welcome as she joins us.
Thanks, Michael. Well, he introduced me, so nothing else really needs to be said. Restrictive, why only one way to God? And, you know, you might have come today just because you're a little bit nervous to hear me talk on this subject. You might have come today thinking, the reason why this is a big objection to the Christian faith is people can't really believe that there is just one truth. People can't really believe that there is one way to God. That's so politically incorrect. That's so not safe to talk about these days. And before I launch into a discussion on that briefly, I want to just read out a brief poem by a journalist called Steve Turner. He's a British journalist and author, and it's called The Modern Thinker's Creed. And I think it just gets to the heart of our fears and possibly a little bit of our assumptions behind one of these major objections to the Christian faith. It goes like this. We believe in Marx, Freud, and Darwin. We believe that everything is okay as long as you don't hurt anyone to the best of your definition of hurt and to the best of your definition of knowledge. We believe in sex before, during, and after marriage. We believe in the therapy of sin. We believe that adultery is fun. We believe that everything is getting better despite evidence to the contrary. The evidence must be investigated, and you can prove anything with evidence. We believe that there is something in horoscopes, UFOs, and bent spoons. Jesus was a good man, just like Buddha, Muhammad, and ourselves. We believe he was a good teacher of morals, but we believe that his good morals were really bad. We believe in all religions, and they're all basically the same. At least the one we read was. They all believe in love and goodness. They only differ on matters of creation, sin, heaven, hell, God, and salvation. We believe that man is essentially good. It is only his behavior that lets him down. This is the fault of society. Society is the fault of conditions, and conditions are the fault of society. We believe that every man must find the truth that is right for him. Reality will adapt accordingly. The universe will readjust and history will alter. We believe there is no absolute truth except for the truth that there is no absolute truth. We believe in the rejection of creeds and the flowering of individual thoughts. If that was too slow, I can speed up. What do we believe? What do we truly believe? We like the idea of a truth that fits everyone. And you know what, before you turn off now and think, now she's going to go on that traditional Christian rag about, there's no real absolute truth except the one absolute truth and go down that and bore us to death. I really don't want to bang up that desire in every single one of us that we could all be right some way. I don't think it's just because we've deluded ourselves. I think it speaks to a longing in all of our hearts that every single individual, no matter where you come from, no matter what cultural background you come from, no matter what age you find yourself in history, wants to be able to say, I've made sense of reality. I've made sense of life, and the way that I've made sense of life fits. Please don't mess with it, because I'm good, and you're good, and let's just leave it there. Couldn't there really be one truth and many stories about that truth? One person put it this way: the difference between men and animals is that men tell stories. What makes us human beings is that we tell stories to make sense of life. Life is full of stories. And let me just stop there before I go any further, because I'm going to be using this word story a lot today, and so I want to properly define it. The Oxford English Dictionary, since you might be doubting me by my accent, says that stories are accounts, real or imagined, of the past, present, or future. Stories are accounts, real or imagined, of the past, present, or future. So what does this mean? It means that consciously or unconsciously, we are hearing, telling stories all of the time. We learn through stories. We create through stories. We explain through stories. We remember through stories. We describe through stories. And you know what? Where I've come to notice this in reality for me is that I have a 3-year-old daughter called Sophia. And a couple weeks ago, we were sitting around the dinner table, and she put her spoon down, and she went, "Mommy, tell me a story." And now, at this age, you will do just about anything, including backflips, to get your child to eat, okay? And so I thought, okay. And I took a deep breath, and I went, "Once upon a time, there was a princess called Sophia." And she went, "No, a real story." And it dawned on me that she was starting to understand that there are make-believe fairy tales, but that memories, I got to the bottom. I said, "What do you mean by a real story?" And she said, "Tell me something that happened when I was a little girl." 3-year-old, right? She wanted a memory. She wanted to try to remember with me. She's fascinated about stories about my life that I can remember about my own history. And if you think about maybe the best lecture you've ever heard, or the best explanation of how to do something, when you finally got a mathematical formula, or when you finally got how to ride a bike, or you finally got a concept, probably those ways were not because they were lectured to ad nauseum to you, but because someone demonstrated how to do it. They told a story. They did it in a way that you could grasp, that you could own it, that it made sense of life and history. We're all creating stories all day long, all of the time. Film, explanations, memories, it's all a story. And because of this, it has been claimed that there are really only 5 to 7 different plots behind every single story that will ever be told. Plots like overcoming the monster, rags to riches, a quest, a voyage and return, comedy. And that all of these stories that are being told all through life are just ways of explaining life, how it began, how to find meaning, purpose, how to overcome the challenges that lie in the way of us achieving our destinies. Why are there so many religions and worldviews and explanations and philosophies in life? Well, it's our way of trying to make sense of our individuality in life. We are characters in a much larger story, trying to make sense of a gnawing reality that there is something bigger and greater than us out there. Even if at that moment you're going, I know where you're going. Maybe just that something bigger and greater than us out there is the time that has passed behind us and the time that will go on when our individual story is up. No matter what you believe about God today, you have to admit something went on before you were a twinkle in your mommy's eye, and when you cease to be a bright spark of life here, history and life will continue. How do we make sense of that gnawing reality that there is something bigger than just our individuality? Religions and worldviews and philosophies are our way of trying to understand, if we can ever understand what's bigger than us, and if we can understand it, is there a way for us to relate to it? And so in that sense, all disciplines, all religions, all worldviews are stories that help us explain our reality. But here is the problem. How can you tell if your framework for making sense of life is true? How can you tell if your story that you're comfortable with, that makes sense of life, that you agree with, that fits all of your boxes, how can you tell if it is true? And if you think, well, I got that covered, I know it's true, how can you tell if you have the whole truth or just part of it? Can any of us ever really be sure about the whole story? Maybe you've heard of the famous Hindu story of the elephant that's in the Veda. And what happens in this story is it's told something along these lines. I'm not quoting it directly from it, so stick with me. Basically, there are blind scribes, right? And each of these blind scribes is holding on to part of an elephant. And one of the blind scribes is holding onto the tail. And he goes, this is definitely a rope of some sort. It's a cord. I can feel it. It's consistency. It's strong. It takes my weight. It's definitely a cord. Another blind scribe has the ear of the elephant. And he's patting the ear and he's stroking it. And he's going, this is definitely a sheet of papyrus. It's paper. It's writable. It's malleable. This is what it is. And another blind scribe has the trunk. And he's going, it's a giant python. And I can feel it moving. It's alive. It's around me. And then what is the moral of the story? Well, if we stepped back, every single one of the blind scribes is actually right. It's an elephant. They might describe the elephant a different way. They might get to it a different way, but it's actually all the same thing. What do we get from this story? You see, we are all, every single one of us, blind characters in the larger story of life. We have one of our senses taken away. We can use our other senses to follow clues about truth, to follow clues about reality that history and our experience or academy or science have left along the way. And to a degree, we can even test these theories that we've come to know by our other senses. But how can we ever, anyone be absolutely certain that their description is right? And one day we will wake up and see, as the teller of this story tells, that it's all been the same elephant. And so if we would all just stop fighting, we'd all get along and there would be world peace, and now we've become Miss America. It's a wonderful thing. Okay, but what's the problem with this story? Someone has to not be a blind scribe to be able to know that it's all the same thing. Now, Jesus came on the scene and he makes this huge claim in the book of John, chapter 14, verse 6, okay? He says, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life, and no one comes to the Father, no one can get to God, to truth, to life, to the way of living things, but through me. And see, this is the point where people goes, that's why I don't like Christianity. That's why you guys are all arrogant. That's why you're exclusive. That's why, you go down these things and you sound really ignorant. Didn't you just say, Michelle, didn't you hear the story of the elephant? It's all the same thing. We're all blind. How can you claim, you blind Christian, that you have figured out something that no one can figure out? Isn't it arrogant? Isn't it exclusive? What makes you less blind than any of the rest of us? And the answer is, well, you know what? Christians were just as blind as everyone in the story. We were blind scribes. We could do nothing. We could reason in no different way. We could think no different way. We could behave in no different way or feel no different way than anybody else with a really good grasp on this could make sense of reality. And if, as Christians, we share our story and we base our confidence that we have found truth in the fact that our wonderful reason and logic has gotten us to a fact that we are confident, or if I base my confidence that I have found the truth, that I've had this crazy feeling and experience that no one else has had, and now I'm sure, and you can't have it. It doesn't matter what your worldview or your religion says and makes you feel mine trumps yours. Or if I say that my behavior makes me morally superior to you, and because of my behavior, I have found a way to know truth, then you know what? It is arrogant. And I want to stop right there and say, if that is the sense you've gotten of the Christian faith, or that's the way you've had it explained to you, then you probably do have a bad taste in your mouth. And I'm sorry if that's the case, because we as Christians are not sure and confident that we have the way to God because our reasoning is better than anyone else from any other worldview or culture, or because our behavior is better than anyone else from any worldview or culture, or because our feelings and our experiences are any more spiritual or any more real than anyone else's. And the truth of the matter is, nothing that we could ever do as Christians or anyone else can ever cure our blindness. And we have no right to claim based on ourselves that our opinion could outweigh anyone else. And you guys in Oxford, I was at New College. I worked with Oxford students for 7 years. I came to know and love the term that we don't use in the States, blagging. You familiar with that? Okay, you guys are bright people. You know that anyone can blag confidently, long enough, loud enough, or you fill in the adjective, and they can make their worldview, they can make their grip on reality, they can make their truth seem acceptable. They can fight it louder and longer and harder. And so what makes one person's blag about reality any better than the other one. But this is precisely the reason that in the 7 years that I worked with students here in this city, that I heard time and time and time again that English students, particularly literature students, ended up hating novels by the time they were done. They didn't want to pick up another book. It didn't matter if it was a sleazy, easy read for the summer. It didn't matter if it was fast-paced murder detective. English students were so sick. I'm sorry if you're an English student, you don't feel this way, or you're a first year and I'm bursting your bubble, okay? But by the third year, they're like, I don't want to read one more novel because I not take one more endless interpretation of what the truth or the meaning of this novel is. And that's a little bit like life. That's a little bit like religion, maybe. It's a little bit like worldview, a little bit like this claim to truth and to meaning. But my question is, can there or will there ever be an end to endless interpretations of life, reality, truth, love? Could we ever be sure of our framework, our story of truth, our way of understanding reality? And my answer to that is the only way to figure out the true meaning of a story and to be absolutely sure would be to meet the author. The only way would be to meet the author. You know, I read out that funny little creed at the beginning, and we all laughed because we know there are a lot of assumptions and loopholes, and it lays a lot of truth to some of our giant claims that there is no truth. But at the heart of things, all religions are not the same. All religions do not point to God. All religions do not actually say that all religions are the same. And one author put it this way: at the heart of every religion is an uncompromising commitment to a particular way of defining who God is or is not, and accordingly of defining life's purpose. That's what religion, or even lack of religion, is about. Religion, or the rejection of religion, is a way that you define who God is or who God is not, how you found meaning or how you don't find meaning, how you find satisfaction or how you don't find satisfaction. And once you have come up with your perfect definition of who God is or why there is no God, the only way to be absolutely sure that what you have just perfectly and maybe even logically described is true would be to meet that God, or be able to completely prove that there is no God. So what is the story of Christianity? Just as I close. Christianity has been referred to as this term, the gospel. Have you heard that before? All that means, the gospel, it's a Greek word that means good news. Christianity is good news about God. And this is the good news. The good news of Christianity is that God has come to us. And this is the main difference between the Christian faith and all other faiths, all other worldviews, and all other philosophies. This is the reason why we are confident as Christians that we have found out the truth about God, because God has come to us. We were blind. There was nothing we could do to get to goodness. There was nothing we could do to be forever happy. There was no way to get to eternal life or get to righteousness or get to love or get to meaning. Meaning and life and love had to come to us. The story of Christianity is a story about the God who is love. And this God of love is the author of life, the creator and sustainer of the universe. And reality is all about being in relationship with eternal love, life and light that is found in him. In this sense, as this wonderful events week has been named, we were born loved. The author of life, an author who is love in his very nature, decided to write a story and write us in as characters. We were born out of love, out of the very mind of love, out of the very creativity of love himself. He wrote a story, and we were the characters in that story. We were born loved. And as you might expect, it is almost impossible to separate an author's imprint and character from the author's writing. And so there have been clues and imprints of the author, the sustainer and creator of the universe throughout history in the world that all people can see and sense and follow and know. But you know what? It's easy to get caught up in wrong interpretations of these clues and these imprints of God in the world and in history of the author. Or it's actually possible to accidentally miss the clues that have been left by the author. Or it is also possible to ignore the clues completely or to reject them. And because this always happens, and because this was bound to happen, the author, who is a loving author, wrote himself into the story. He didn't want there to be any way that we, the characters that he loved so much, that were a part of him, that he wrote the story of history about, he wanted to make sure that we got his clues, that we got to know him, that we knew that, yes, that gnawing reality inside of us, that we're part of something greater, that there is someone or something out there that has caused all of history, and our tiny blip in that story and continues that story throughout all eternity, that he is real, that he is love, and he wants us to know him. And because we kept missing the clues or misinterpreting or turning away from them intentionally, he goes, I know what I will do. I will write myself in to the story. And that is the story of Jesus Christ. This is where the Christian's confidence and claim of knowing God and truth only through Jesus comes from. The fact that we have met the author of the story of life. And we've met him through the person of Jesus Christ. I want to encourage you, if you haven't done this before, if you've been coming to the lunchtime talks, you've heard a lot probably about the biggest objections to the Christian faith. And if you've been coming to the evening talks, you've been hearing a clear message about this person, the story of Jesus Christ. But before you make up your mind, before you turn your back on the crazy claims of Christianity, or even if you've had bad experiences of the church or bad experience of religion, look at Jesus. Investigate the claims he made. He claimed that he was God. What would be able to sustain a claim of divinity? Read the teaching. Time magazine called Jesus the most perfect and spotless, pure life that ever lived. His teaching had been the basis for governments, for political theories, for peace treaties throughout the ages and throughout different cultures. Look at the miracles that were written about him. Who could raise others from the dead? Who could open blind eyes? Who could open deaf ears? Who could raise himself from the dead? Look at how he fulfilled prophecy. Over 300 prophecies were written about this man Jesus long, long, long before he was born. And you might say, well, you know, it's easy to fake things. He could have been a really intelligent person and line things up. Well, let me just say, I know I just told you I have a daughter. That means I have given birth, okay? It's really hard, even for the mom herself, to be able to time exactly when and where that baby will come. I would say, as someone that has experience, impossible. Okay, so that one prophecy alone trumps a lot of things. Look at the way he fulfilled prophecy. He claimed to be God. He claimed to be the creator. He claimed to be the author of the story. We as Christians are sure and confident that Jesus is the author of life because we believe his claim to be God. We've looked into it, and mostly we believe it because we believe that the author of life would be able to give eternal life, would be able to conquer death itself. And we believe that Jesus, the author of life, being written into the story, came, lived a spotless life, fulfilled prophecy, but more than anything, went to the cross, took all of our turning away from him, sacrificed his very life just to show the depths of his love that we've been talking about every single night at these meetings. And then he didn't stay dead. He rose from the dead. Crazy claim? Maybe. But look into the evidence. Look at Lee Strobel's book, The Case for Faith. Look at the evidence of the empty tomb. If he really were the author of life, he would be able to come back from the grave. And maybe you've never heard Jesus explain this way. It's not just some crazy American thing coming down from the stage. In Hebrews 12, that's in the second part towards the end of the Bible, it describes Jesus as this. It says, we as Christians look unto Jesus, who is the author and the finisher of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising its shame. What does that mean? Endured the cross, despising its shame. We're sure he's the author because he died and he despised the death the shame of death by conquering it and raising back to life. And now he's seated at the right hand of the throne of God. We as Christians are sure of the meaning of life because we know the author of life, Jesus Christ. And so we don't arrogantly say that we know because we can reason better, or because we felt something superior, because we act more superior. It's not arrogant to say that you're absolutely sure that your interpretation of a story is right if you personally know the author. It's not arrogant to say that you're completely confident that your interpretation of the story is right if you personally know the author. C.S. Lewis put it this way: if you are a Christian, you do not have to believe that all of the other religions are simply wrong all through. If you are an atheist, you do have to believe that the main point in all religions of the whole world is simply one huge mistake. If you are a Christian, you are free to think that all those religions, even the strangest ones, contain at least some hint of truth. But of course, being a Christian does mean that where Christianity differs from other religions, Christianity is right and they are wrong. And I love this that he ends on. As in arithmetic, there is only one right answer to a sum. All other answers are wrong, but some of the wrong answers are much nearer being right than others. Why do I say this? I believe that we all are searching for meaning. We all have that sense that there's something greater and that we need to make sense of our individuality. And so because of that, through cultures and times and history, there have been worldviews, philosophies, religions that have sprung up trying to make sense of life. And because I believe that we are all born loved, we are all born and made in the image of God, that all of the stories we tell to make sense of life will have some hints of the author of life through them. And so I'm not saying we should about love, or we should chuck out everything about truth or peace that people from different cultures or religions have to offer us. There is only one right answer. It's the author. The author gives the perfect interpretation because he's the one who wrote it. But he's been leaving clues. And you can be very close, even if you come from a culture or a background, or even if you yourself think you are very, very far away. The author has come to us. He has come through Jesus Christ. Look at the evidence. Investigate the claims. And if when you do that you think, wow, there's truth in who Jesus is, then take a step back and look at his claim of being the author of life and see what that does to your understanding of meaning. I'm just going to close by saying a little prayer. And I don't want anyone to feel forced in doing this, but maybe you've been coming along to these talks over the last week, and maybe you've been having great conversations in your college afterwards, and maybe you've been having conversations for a few years now with a Christian flatmate. You just think, you know what, it might start to make sense, and I want to respond. I want to know meaning. I want to say that I could know the author, and it could put me to peace about life and meaning and origin and destiny. And I'm going to just say a prayer that says a few small words I'm still trying to get into my daughter's head. Sorry, please, and thank you. Basically, it's going to say, I'm sorry for trying to put my own meaning in life, Jesus. Please, I want to accept your meaning, accept what you did to show that you are God. And thank you for coming and making yourself known. And if you want to pray with me, I'm just going to pray slowly, words that basically sound something like that. You can join me in the privacy of your own heart. We'll pray, and then I'll just talk about the comment card, and we'll have, you can go to your lectures after that. Thanks for being so kind and listening. So would you just pray with me if you want to? Dear Jesus, I want to know true meaning. I'm sorry for trying to find it on my own. Thank you for coming into my world and showing me the meaning of love and life and forgiveness through your life and your death. I want to accept you as the author of life. Please come into my life and bring true meaning. Amen. Well, we've got these response cards here, and just before you go off to your lecture, or if you're going to stay around, I'd like everyone to maybe pick it up. There was a pen on your chair as well. Thanks so much for coming, and we would love to hear back from every single person. Even if you don't fit one of these options I'm going to read out to you, then here, please don't get any more Americans on the back. or something to that effect, okay? And the first box says, I've got lots of questions. Please put me in touch with someone to chat through them. If you've got some questions, then check that. The next box says, tell me more about Born Loved. We're going to have a video about that in a second, and that's going to be a course that's happening where you can talk through some of these more regularly after this week is over. And the final, if you prayed that prayer with me at the end, we'd love to hear from you, and we would love to be able to resource you or talk to you. So please just check that. So I just want to hand it back over to Michael now. Thanks for listening.
Okay. We're going to kick off our time of Q&A now. If we could have the first question up on the screens. Here we go. Sorry, I guess in Oxford we're used to writing essays, aren't we? This one's a bit long. Christianity rejects the conclusions of science and other religions. How can it claim to see the whole elephant when it makes no attempt to explain the observations of these other viewpoints?
Okay, there's a lot of good questions and claims, I think, in that. If the person that asked that question is still here, I would love to encourage you to get a copy of the recording from the Tuesday afternoon talk by a professor of physics, Ard Louis, who gave a wonderful discussion and from a scientific point of view about how science and faith are compatible. I'm so sorry. I think I'm really bothering the video man back there because I move around while I speak. I don't think that Christianity rejects the conclusions of science and other religions. That's two big things. Let me start with science. Christianity does not reject the conclusions of science. There are many scientists. Many scientists here in this noble university, scientists that I am great friends with, that completely uphold stances of science and have no problem blending them with their faith in Jesus Christ, and rejects the conclusions of other religions. The conclusion, like I talked about, we do believe that there is one truth, that there is one God. And so to make any type of truth claim, if it is going to be truth, there has to be anything that is contrary to that truth must be false. That's the very definition of truth. I would say, like I used that C.S. Lewis quote at the end, that Christians can recognize where there are wonderful things said about peace, about hope, about truth, about relationship, about friendship in many different religions and in many different worldviews, and in those that have no religion. Where we differ is that final ultimate thing of how we are sure about the truth of where we have found. And the idea, how can it claim to see the whole elephant when it makes no attempt to explain the other observations of these viewpoints, is I was hoping through this talk to actually take into consideration the observations of other viewpoints, to say that there are really helpful observations from other viewpoints, because I do believe that the author of life has written himself into every single culture, and every single person can know him, but that we are blind as Christians as well, that actually the author has come down to cure our blindness. Does that make sense? We aren't claiming as Christians that we are the only unblind one and we have seen the elephant. We were claiming that we were just as blind, but I guess the elephant, to push that metaphor to its extreme, it breaks down when you do metaphors, came to us, made himself known and cured our blindness, and that's an offer, curing of blindness, that we can know, meaning that isn't closed to just Christians, isn't closed to something we've attained on our own, that he offers that to everyone. So I hope that's helpful. Maybe the next question.
Great, thanks. If we want to get the next one up. The point is not whether there is absolute truth. There may be. The question is whether God would send us to hell for eternity for being mistaken about what the absolute truth is.
Okay. The point is not whether they're absolute truth. There may be. Okay. Great question. And I think that this is one of the heartbeats of this cry about how can there only be one truth? How can there only be one way to God? And we covered some of these questions last night as well. So once again, I'm not trying to be a broken record. I just want to save you time if there are recordings of different things. The question is whether God would send us to hell for eternity for being mistaken about what that absolute truth is. So I'd hoped as well in my talk to kind of put forth an idea that ultimate reality is knowing the author of that reality. The ultimate reality for a Christian is about coming to know God, a God who is love, a God who offers himself, and a God who offers life. And that being a Christian is about being in relationship with this God. And so I define heaven and eternity as being forever in relationship with this God in a place where, unlike here and now, suffering and evil and pain because of the choices that we have made to write our own story have entered this world, that those will be taken away once and forever, once and for all. And the Bible is very clear that heaven is where God is for all eternity. And so if we have made a choice, okay? C.S. Lewis put it this way: free will, though it allows evil to exist, is the only thing that makes true love possible. If the author of the story is trying to write himself in to be known at all places and all times and in all cultures, and that is a claim I am making, and if you want to argue with that with me later, you want me to explain that, please come up to me afterwards and talk to me. I'd love to talk you through. I talked to 2 students for an hour last night after I made a similar claim. If God is trying to be seen through all of time and write himself in the Bible it talks about all of creation declares the glory of God, and that the heavens declare it, that men will be, men and women, at the end of the age without excuse. And we hear that term without excuse, and we hear kind of the negative effects of it, but positively in the fact that we can trust that God is doing everything, has always been doing everything to make himself known to all peoples, from all cultures, from all times, so that we will all have an opportunity to say yes to him or to reject him. And so then, really, and I know this is a long answer, but this is a big question. The whole idea is how we feel and how we understand hell. And so if my definition, and I do believe a biblical definition of heaven being a place where you're forever in perfect relationship with God and nothing can ever stop that, then hell is the opposite of that. Hell is where the opportunity and the chance for relationship with God is not there anymore. And just to boil it down, maybe for my small mind, what greater hell is it to be bound for someone to all of eternity that you don't want to be with? Okay? If any of you saw Tim Burton's, now you think I'm really going out there and answer the question, Tim Burton, if any of you saw his version of Alice in Wonderland, what happened at the end of that story? The Queen of Hearts got banished, right? And then her little cohort, this guy that kind of played both sides both times, got banished with her. And his banishment for all eternity was not just being banished, but being chained to this person who she desperately loved him and thought that he felt the same way and just was all mad about him. And he really hated being with her. He didn't want to be with her. And it was more of a hell for him to not have a choice of who he wanted to be in relationship and stuck with for all of eternity than for him to have been on his own. And so my roundabout point of saying that if heaven and eternity is about being with God eternally, then the opposite is, if you don't want to be with him, it would actually be greater injustice and more cruel and not love to force someone to be in relationship with you for all eternity if you haven't made that choice to be with them. There's a lot to unpack in that. Please come and ask me and talk to me afterwards. Would love to hear back from you. Next question.
Yeah, sorry, also to mention, last night, this theme was touched on quite a few times, actually, and that talk and the kind of Q&A is online. So do have a look at that if this is one question that's particularly big for you. Sorry, I had to pick up my phone to see what time it was, to see... and I think maybe I have time for one more quick one. Okay. If I haven't personally met the author, how can I know there's only one way to God? Does that mean I'm not born loved?
Great question. Okay, the only way is to meet him, and meeting him is not selective. That's the beauty, that's the good news of Christianity. It's not something that certain people, the way they behave or the way they think or the way they act or the way they feel, can only get to meet the author once you've fulfilled these requirements. Our certainty that we have met the author and the offer to meet the author has happened in the person of Jesus Christ. And if you look into the claims of Jesus Christ, the claims that he said he was God, the way he fulfilled prophecy, like I said, that he really did rise raised from the dead, then you have to look at those and you have to make up your mind yourself. Was he just crazy? You know, we had this talk from Vaughn Roberts the first day. Someone who made a claim to be God, he's either crazy and he doesn't know what he's talking about, or he's trying to deceive people, and that would be really vicious, or he was God himself. And you have to make up your mind for yourself. You have to look at the evidence and see, could Jesus have actually been God? And if he was God, then he is the author of life, and he has offered himself and the story of life and the meaning and acceptance to every single person. So that's...
Great, thanks so much. Would you give Michelle a round of applause?